Hey, so this is my film analysis project. This is a review of the movie Memento, which falls into the personal identity category of movies. I chose this movie because it was, a movie that I had heard about. It had really high ratings when I looked it up, and it had a lot of good actors in it. I thought the plot was very interesting, which I knew would, keep me excited about the movie. And yeah, it just seemed like a movie that would really touch on a lot of issues dealing with philosophy and personal identity. I'm just kind of reading off my notes on the computer to touch on the main important points, but my philosophical thesis is based on the idea that this movie demonstrates a theme of memory being a big part of establishing personal identity, which can be seen throughout many parts in the movie. And this is mainly demonstrated in the character Leonard, who has the short-term memory loss. And it can also be seen in the story that he tells about a worker's claim. He reviewed the worker who also had short-term memory loss. There's a bit of a twist in the end of the movie where it turns out that, the story of this worker he reviewed named Sammy, I believe, was likely just, his memories placed onto someone else to kind of cope with what really happened. Um, So the first scene that I talked about for this movie in my paper was when Leonard is describing the worker Sammy, who he reviewed for the claim. He says the quote, "Conditioning didn't work for Sammy, so he became helpless, but it works for me. I live the way Sammy couldn't, habit and conditioning, acting on instinct." I feel this is a telling part that shows, he's not sure of who he is really based on the short-term memory loss because he says it himself. He's making decisions out of habit and conditioning and acting on instinct, not really on morals and logic and decision making that will come with normal thought process from a person not dealing with the memory loss. So I feel this is a good example of him and Sammy, or if Sammy was just a version of him, are dealing with personal identity problems because of their short-term memory loss. They've grown since their memory loss started, but they have not been able to hold on to those experiences and memories. So even though they might have changed through age or through tattoos like Leonard gets throughout the movie, they don't remember how they came to be where they are now. So it's making it difficult for them to decide, are they the person from back then, or do they just not know who they are. Um, the second scene that I described in my examples were when he's remembering a scene that his wife was reading a book that she had already read many times before, and he didn't understand it. He remembers this while he's burning sentimental items of hers, trying to kind of forget the sad times about losing his wife and stuff. And him looking back, remembering this, he says, the excitement of reading a book I thought came from the unknown. But I feel this is kind of symbolic to him, now he's got no memory of short-term memory, so everything's a new unknown thing to him and he's not really comfortable with it. I think he realizes throughout remembering this scene with his wife that the memory the knowing of what happened, or rereading a book that you've read before, gives you the comfort, and that's the comfort that he's kind of seeking out by trying to, get back to knowing who he really is. The third example that I used for proving my philosophical thesis of the movie is when he is arguing in the car with Teddy, who is a man that he's kind of, he can trust based on his tattoos and pictures and descriptions he's written down. He thinks he can trust him, but he is also, he's got no short-term memory, so it's kind of like he's re-meeting this guy every time he meets him, along with everybody else who he meets throughout the movie. But him and Teddy are arguing in the car, and Teddy says, "That's who you were. That's who you were, Lenny. You don't know who you are or who you've become since the incident." He reaches out to Leonard's lapel or his coat and gently opens his jacket and says, "Put it this way, were you wearing designer suits when you sold insurance?" And I feel this is a really strong example, probably best of the examples that I wrote down, because it shows, he takes a second and looks back like, well, it looks like he realizes he's not the same person who he was. Even if it's something as, simple as noticing that he's in a completely different suit or outfit, he's in a completely different car, So these are like changes that he can witness through his eyes, and he doesn't realize how he got there, so he knows that there's been experiences that he obviously went through that have changed him, but have not stuck with him logically. They don't play into his thinking of the world now. This again goes back to, it's 20 years from now, if he's still got the short-term memory loss. It's kind of like, was he the same person he was back then? I mean, he won't be physically, and he's gone through so many experiences. He might be living in a different house or something, So it's kind of like short-term memory loss is a big theme that throughout this movie that plays into establishing personal identity. One contradictory scene that I thought could maybe be against my philosophical thesis is the scene that Natalie says, "Trust your own judgment," and Leonard says, I know the feel of the world. These are certainties. You can't change certainties. Just like I know what this is going to make the sound that this is going to make when I drop this cup, or he goes through a couple different examples, and I feel you maybe argue that these certainties that he talks about are kind of like, that makes him who he is based on just his knowing of the world, his, behind the scenes memories that kind of determine who he is. But I also feel that, these are kind of instincts, and he says that they're more memories, not just instincts. But even so, I feel that these would be very basic memories that don't really shape who he is completely. And although he's got a feel of the world, that these can be changed, just like in his example of sending the worker who had the worker Sammy to the doctor to do the tests where they picked up items that some of them had been electrified. And he explains that with almost all short-term memory cases, these objects that he picks up should install into him new instincts to, maybe after so many times not pick up that object, even if he does have short-term memory loss, just based on the new instincts installed in him. And I feel that kind of shows that if those instincts can be changed from picking up the electrified objects, then maybe his instincts are being changed throughout the experiences that he's going through that he doesn't remember. So even though he may feel like the same person based on the certainties and who he was before, remembering who he was before, the fact that some of his instincts might have been changed based on these experiences, and just, his physical self would be changed, and his living conditions or where he's at and everything else. I feel that shows that this contradictory scene, even if interpreted that way, isn't a sound argument against my philosophical thesis. In conclusion, this was a very interesting movie that deals with many philosophical issues, but it is clear that the big idea of the movie is the role that memory plays in establishing personal identity. And I feel it's, an important theme that kind of shows you how you are, the person you are, or how you become the person you are. And I thought it was a very interesting movie that really makes you think. Overall, great movie, and yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to watching this one again too, just like with Crimson Tide. But I really like this movie. I'm glad that I picked this one. So overall, that's my film analysis, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thanks.